Welcome to Creative in Tech, a podcast show powered by ReadSpeaker.ai. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and I'm the brand evangelist for North America at ReadSpeaker. And this show is all about highlighting the various people, brands, and organizations that are creatively using one of the fastest growing spaces in technology, conversational AI, which can include things like voice technology, text to speech, and more. Today, we are talking about the value of the customer experience. What is the ROI? Where can we be able to get more raving and lifelong fans? And can we use technology to do that? So I'm very excited to bring our guest on today. I have John Picoult. He is the founder of Watermark Consulting, and he is going to share with us all about customer experience today. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Carrie. Happy to be here with you.
Yes. So I want to start out with you personally. You've been kind of fascinated and in this customer experience space for quite some time. I'm curious where your interest came in terms of customer experience long ago. And also, how do you kind of help these organizations? What caused you to work with large organizations to make their customer experience great?
Yeah. My entree into business was actually selling radio advertisements door to door. It was back when I was in college, and the radio station that was manned by the students was actually a commercial station. It didn't receive any funding from the university. And so when I walked in there at the beginning of my sophomore year and said, "Hey, I want to be a radio show DJ," they said, "Well, yeah, great, but if you want anything other than the graveyard shift, you need to bring revenue into the station by selling ads." And so that was my first entree into business. And actually, even though back then it wasn't really a term that was used, customer experience, it was there that I became familiar with this notion that every interaction, every touch point that you have with customers, whether it's in person, whether it's in print, whether it's online, really exerts a very material influence on their likelihood to consider buying from you, to go ahead and buy from you, to repurchase from you, to refer you to others. And so that was really where, again, even though it wasn't a term, that had a name all the way back then, that's really where I got this flavor for crafting end-to-end customer experiences that really resonated strongly with the audience that you were trying to influence. And as I went through my career, I think that ultimately, once I got into the real business world, not the college radio station world, what became apparent to me is that many forms of competitive differentiation are fleeting. But a truly great customer experience and the internal ecosystem that supports it can be difficult for other firms to replicate, yet can accord tremendous strategic and economic advantage to a firm. And so that's really what made me stick with customer experience, just this idea that it is kind of the sole source of sustainable competitive advantage. And then you asked about, my motivation for helping large organizations improve their customer experience. And I have to admit that was probably born a little bit out of frustration with the fact that businesses today, I find, they subject customers and even employees to a whole host of indignities. If you think about it, it's as bad as ever these days. You hear these horror stories of people being on hold for 8 hours with an airline, waiting for someone to take their call. You've got retail stores that are poorly staffed, hard to find somebody to help you. I just find that there is a lack of humanity in a lot of parts of the business world. And I think that customer experience has an opportunity to change that, which is why I really got very interested in it.
Yes, I cannot agree more. And as you have a new book out, as I was reading it, I wanted to have you talk about what the definition of customer experience is, because you have a few pieces in there and you also kind of add to the definition the value of even employees and interactions. So, can you kind of break down what customer experience means, especially today when we're talking in 2021?
Yeah. So I sort of hate these, highfalutin definitions of customer experience that I often come across because I think that what's really important if you're an organization that's trying to differentiate along this axis, you want to use a definition that everyone in your organization is going to immediately get it. They're going to do the head nod and say, "Okay, I understand that." So my preferred definition is, not highly academic and whatnot, and it's simply this: customer experience is how customers feel about their interactions with you. And as you note in the book, I unpack that definition, and let me take a moment to do that here for your listeners. First, let's focus on the word customers, how customers feel about their interactions with you. I use a very broad definition of customers. Sometimes the customer might be an individual consumer, the traditional customer that most of us think about when we hear that word. Sometimes in a B2B context, it might be an individual at an institution. But the customer can sometimes also be a colleague that's just a few steps down the hall from you. The customer could also be one of your staff members, an employee. It could be a sales intermediary, a distributor. I think that it's very important when you're trying to improve customer experience that you really get a handle on all of the different constituencies that you serve and that you're trying to provide value to, because they all deserve to have an experience that is architected, that's engineered, tailored to them and their needs. So that's one word to focus on, is customer. Second is this word feel. And that's an important word in the definition because ultimately, people's perceptions of a customer experience are largely influenced not by logical and rational evaluations of the interaction, but really by emotional ones. It really comes down to, how did I feel after that interaction? So, going back to the 8-hour call center wait, even if you pick up my call in 5 seconds, and there's no automated response, I just get a live person on the line. Even if you do that, if at the end of the call, I feel like you have disrespected me in some way, maybe you have embarrassed me or made me feel stupid or inadequate in some way, it doesn't matter how fast you pick up the phone. I'm still going to walk away with a bad impression. And so that's what I mean about the feelings part of it and the emotional resonance. And then the third word that I would highlight for your listeners is interactions, how customers feel about their interactions with you. And it's important to understand that those interactions, it's another word like customer that's used very broadly. That encompasses every live, print, and digital interaction point that your customers could possibly encounter when they are working with you or your business. And in addition, it spans the entire life cycle, even before somebody's a customer, because that's part of the customer experience. During the pre-sale, when they first hear about you in marketing and whatnot, those are examples of interactions that deserve to be carefully choreographed, all the way up to and including if a customer defects from your business. You hope that never happens, but if they do, I'd argue that's a touch point that deserves to be managed as carefully and intentionally as any other in the life cycle. So that's my definition of customer experience. And as you could see, it is very broad. It encompasses quite a lot, because all of those different interactions ultimately are going to shape people's perceptions of your business.
Yeah, and you were talking a lot about call centers. For us at Read Speaker, we're a text to speech company. We do synthetic voices, the voice that speaks back, I like to say. Can you talk a little bit about you have something in your book that IKEA did in terms of technology, IKEA Place. I want you to share that story. And then I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how technology and maybe specifically voice technology can actually create a great customer experience versus kind of what you just described, where people maybe feel disappointed or not respected in a conversation.
Yes. So IKEA Place is an app that IKEA developed a few years back, and basically what it does is, with smartphones that are capable of it, it provides kind of an augmented reality view of pretty much any piece of furniture in their catalog. You're able to just kind of peer through your smartphone and actually see it in the room that you're planning to put it in. And I think it's a great example of really weaving technology into the customer experience in a way that just fits beautifully. And the reason I say it fits beautifully is because what IKEA recognized, that story about IKEA comes in a section of the book that talks about creating relevance in the customer experience. And what IKEA recognized, and many companies stumble over this, the answer to the question, what really does my customer care about? What's important to them? And what IKEA realized is that they really don't care about the piece of furniture that they're considering buying. What they care about is how that furniture is going to look in my space, my home, my apartment, my office, whatever. And that's when they came up with this brilliant idea to create this augmented reality app that addresses that need, that people might walk into IKEA and not just articulate that need, but that's really what's going on in their heads. And so now with the IKEA Place app, people are able to just, immediately see without even spending any money how an entire dining room set or an entire entertainment center is actually going to look and fit within the space where they're planning on putting it. And it does a lot of great things for the customer experience because it removes ambiguity and worry from the interaction, because now I've got a clear sense of what this is going to look like. I know if it's going to look good. And so it's really been a big hit for IKEA. And I think it really helped to enhance their customer experience. Now, going to your question about how text to speech and those types of technologies can help with the customer experience. Let me make one comment about AI and technology in general. I think that that's really a fertile ground for companies to create a proactive customer experience. And what I mean by that is when you have technology that is able to look at data and identify issues or opportunities before your customer is even aware of them, that makes for a great experience. And it hits on several of the 12 principles that are outlined in the book. Because when somebody reaches out to you proactively, telling you something you didn't know but is helpful to you, it's really a demonstration of advocacy. And advocacy is a really strong, powerful way to cement engagement with a customer. So I think, for example, about Tesla, which is highly rated by customers, has highest owner satisfaction in the auto industry. The Tesla Model 3, for example, will notify you when there is a problem with your vehicle. And beyond that, it will automatically order the part that you need for repair. So that's a great demonstration of advocacy. It also makes the whole repair process more effortless because you don't have to wait for the parts. They've already been ordered for you. Now, if we take it to sort of the text to speech category specifically, I think that fits in very well with one of the 12 principles that IKEA was using, this idea of creating relevance for your customer. And the reason I say that is because there are certain situations where you have people that either by virtue of the limitations that are imposed on them, by virtue of the situation that they're in, whatever the reason, they just might not be able to read something, for example, and yet they have a task that they need to accomplish. Whether it's doing their homework and, reading a book or whatever it is, they have a task, but they're not able to look at their smartphone or look at a book. I think in a situation like that, text to speech technology is a great fit because what it's doing is it's creating a more relevant customer experience given what's going on in that customer's life at that moment. It also, you could argue, helps to make things effortless for customers, which is another one of the 12 principles. Text to speech, is good for conveying information, but it's also good for people directing devices and things to do stuff. So I don't need to fiddle with a keyboard. I don't need to fiddle with some device. I can just use the power of my voice and I can make things happen. And it makes me think back to Steve Jobs when he first introduced the iPhone. And he talked about, the most powerful stylus that we have, right? Our finger. And I feel like voice is an extension of that. It's something that doesn't require us to even use our finger as the stylus. You can just say what you need. And, if you've got a device that's appropriately configured, it can do what you need.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I thank you for sharing that. I think even going back to your example again of that call center situation where, sometimes having something where there is text to speech or AI that can take the place of a human answering those same questions, where maybe the human might get frustrated. I've answered this 200 times today and they have an attitude on the phone, where something like a text to speech voice and AI is not going to have that. So it can actually benefit the company and the potential customer to have a better experience in the moment. Would you agree?
I do. And I think that there are also some tangential benefits to that strategy, one of which is your live customer service reps can then focus more on the customers who really need them, the
Yes.
customers who don't have the simplest question that can be addressed, through an AI-enabled text-to-speech system. And so you not only are benefiting those people that have the simple questions, you're also benefiting the people that have the complex questions. And because they're likely to, it's likely to be easier for them to get to a live rep who's available and can then assist them. And I think that, so yeah, and then there's also a second audience too that it helps, and that is the employees themselves. because as you noted, one thing that can get a little old for an employee in a call center role is I just get the same basic question over and over again, whatever it is, the password reset or whatnot, and it can make for a very monotonous day. If you are able to shift some of those common types of questions to other platforms that don't require the human in the loop, but are just as good at meeting the customer's needs, it adds a little more variety into the day-to-day work life of those customer service reps, which can make the job more interesting and engaging for them.
Yeah, in your book, I like to, you kind of talked about a lot of times we think of customer experience sometimes as B2C, but B2B is also customer experience. And you talk about P2P, people to person. So, can you talk a little bit about how a B2B company can really be thinking about this value of customer experience when maybe they're not thinking of it as a person to person interaction?
Yeah, so I think that what's important for everyone in a B2B business to recognize is that these days, your customers are evaluating the experience that you provide to them, not against other B2B providers. They are evaluating it relative to the great B2C experience that they might have had yesterday, last week, last month with Amazon or Starbucks or Costco or whomever. And so I think there was a period of time where B2B companies almost felt a little insulated. We're sort of measured by a different bar. But I really don't think that's the case anymore. And actually, there is research that's cited in the book that supports this. Where B2B customers are explicitly asked, what kind of experience is it that you're expecting from the institution that you're patronizing? And the answer is they're evaluating it relative to their experience as a consumer. So I think that it's important for B2B companies to understand that that's where the bar is set. And then in terms the one difference that I think B2B firms have to be on the lookout for is the idea that when you are in a B2B arena, there are multiple constituencies that you are trying to serve through a single relationship and through a single transaction or interaction. And what I mean by that is if you're a B2B supplier working with other businesses, there's the CFO, for example. That's a type of customer, the person that's ultimately got hold of the purse strings. There's the actual end user of your product, wherever that person may reside. There is the purchase decision maker, who might be an executive level person, outside of the finance role, who's ultimately making the decision to go with a particular provider. And so in the B2B realm, that's the one thing to be aware of. That's the one thing that's a little different than say the Amazon, the Costco, the Starbucks interaction, is that there are multiple people that you need to understand what makes them tick, what they want out of the experience, and then to engineer the interactions in a way that's going to resonate for them, that's going to address those needs.
Yes, no, I completely agree, and again, I love you kind of breaking that down in such simple terms to understand. One of the things you also talk about in the book is that customer experience is really hard to copy. So, we're in a day and age where new businesses are popping up constantly, startups are being bought, things are changing, someone does something in marketing, somebody copies it, but you're saying customer experience you can't copy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I think it is harder to copy. I'll put it that way, and here's why. I'll actually give you two reasons. First, let's talk about service industries, okay? Because here it's a little bit more straightforward. In a service industry where a big part of the experience is actually conducted live, whether over the phone, in person, in a retail location, whatever, but a live interaction. There you've got a unique opportunity to sustainably differentiate yourself for a couple of reasons. For example, if you're really good at hiring the best customer focused talent and equipping them with the tools they need to effectively do their job for your customers, well, that can actually be hard to replicate over time because it has something of a snowball effect. Because what happens is you develop a reputation for being known as sort of the go-to employer for the most service-oriented people. So, for example, it's why the people that have the customer experience gene, that are in the department store industry, if they can, they want to go work for Nordstrom because they know that company has values and a mission that's aligned with theirs. If you're in the computer industry, retail, electronics, then you want to be in an Apple store because you know that they're just renowned for the quality of the experience they provide there. If you're in the hotel business, you're drawn to Four Seasons or to Ritz-Carlton. So there is this kind of flywheel effect where if you start to gain traction there in a service business and you are seeding your organization with people that have that customer experience gene, it just kind of grows on itself. And that becomes, over time, tougher for somebody else to then attract, to pull those customer focused people away from your organization. So that would be in a service oriented business. But now let me answer the question in just any industry, whether
Mhm.
it's service oriented or not. Um, some people might be listening and saying, isn't it easy to copy customer experience? I mean, you could come up with some newfangled product and sure, you could patent it, but maybe I could reverse engineer it. You could do something that's cool on your website, but I could look at it and then just copy it. And that's all true. But I think that where the difficulty comes in just copying customer experience is really with the internal ecosystem that underlies that customer experience, because it's that ecosystem which is really creating the tenor and the ambiance in an organization, and shaping people's behaviors in a way that is always attuned to the customer and always focused on going above and beyond and delivering something exceptional to them. And what I mean by that ecosystem, and I think a good way for people to think of this ecosystem is imagine like a huge soundboard on your desk with all kinds of dials. And each dial relates to one aspect of your workplace. It might be how you hire people, how you onboard them and train them, how you measure and reward and recognize them, how you keep them close to your customers and make sure that they stay in tune with what your customers are saying, sort of voice of the customer type capabilities. And my point is that all of these dials, they need to be set in just the right position in order to create an environment that is perfectly aligned with your aspirations for your customer experience. And if any dial is just not aligned perfectly, then everything kind of falls apart a bit, or it just sort of sub-optimizes. And this is the part of customer experience that's difficult, because getting all of those dials aligned just right is not an easy task. And so if you look at companies like Disney or Costco or Southwest Airlines, I think they're great examples of companies that not only are delivering a great, what I call on-stage experience, the things customers can see, feel, hear, and touch, they also are doing great at shaping the backstage part of the experience. All the things in their work environment that shape how they think about the world and how they look at the world and work backwards to engineer an experience that's going to impress their customers. That backstage piece is much harder for people to copy because you can't see it directly, and there are so many tiny elements that are part of it that it's hard to you can't just snap your fingers and replicate it when another company's doing it.
Yeah, again, I think another really good point, kind of having a process and a system in place for customer experience on the back end is equally as important. Like you said, can't be copied. So I want to go kind of to our overall topic here, which is the big question of what is the ROI of customer experience? Because I think many times when we think of the word ROI, or the acronym rather, it's always about financial gain and direct financial gain from doing something. So, how do you kind of describe or define what the ROI of customer experience should be? How do we kind of look at it and measure it? And what is a great ROI that we should expect from a customer experience?
Yeah, so let me actually start from a non-financial perspective, since you mentioned that it is important to look at ROI, from that angle. Um, you asked up front, why do I, what was my interest even in customer experience? Why do I spend time helping companies to improve their customer experience? Well, I do like to think that in business, that the purpose of business is to enrich the lives of others, enrich the lives of your customers, enrich the lives of your employees. That is certainly one ROI, I'd argue, from a great customer experience, is that you are delivering real value to your customers that improves their lives in some way, whether it makes it easier for them to do whatever they need to do, whether it helps them discover things that they never knew that help them live a better life, whatever it is, that is one benefit. Now, there also is a benefit to your workforce, because let's go back to that call center example. If any of your listeners have ever worked in a call center, one of the worst possible things is working in a call center where your customers hate the company, because the phone rings and you just look at it with trepidation, because you know that every time you pick up that phone, like, you are just going to get reamed out, and think about what that is like for your employees. It's horrible. So that is another angle to the ROI of customer experience, is that if you do good by your customers, you are actually going to create a more pleasant environment for your employees to work in, because not every call that they get is going to be a complaint. And I think that's a really important angle to look at it with too, because the opposite has a financial impact. You start seeing turnover because people just can't take it anymore, and the cost of turnover is very real, and it really is an anchor on the financial performance of any company. So, in terms of enriching people's lives, that's the first way I would describe ROI. But let's face it, let's be realistic. The people who are at the top of the pyramid of any organization, they care about the financials. And so that actually is one of the reasons when I first started my firm, Watermark, back in 2009, I struggled with this for a while. What language do you use to persuade people who might harbor skepticism towards the value of customer experience differentiation? How do you talk to them? And what dawned on me is that you really have to use the universal language of business that they can understand, which I came to believe was shareholder value. Because whether you're a public or a private entity, everybody sort of gets shareholder value. Like, they understand it, and they understand that every business wants to increase their market value over time. And so back in 2009, my firm, we actually launched what's called the Watermark Consulting Customer Experience ROI Study. It's been updated every few years. There's a new version of it in my book. And basically what it does is it looks at the stock market performance of the top 10 publicly traded companies in customer experience and the bottom 10 in customer experience, the worst. And mind you, we're not picking the companies. We're using third-party research surveys that are based on interviews with consumers. And the results are just striking. Basically, with 13 years of data under our belts, the companies that lead in customer experience outperform those that lag by an over 3-to-1 margin on average in shareholder return. I mean, it's shocking. When you look at the graph, it is simply shocking. And the other thing that's really important to realize is that there's not just a benefit for the companies delivering a great experience, there's also a penalty exacted on those that are delivering a crummy one. Because what the study shows is that companies that lag in customer experience, they don't only fall short of the return of the leaders, they actually fall short of the return of the market index, the S&P 500. So, if you're delivering a great experience, you're much more likely to outperform the market index and your competitors. And then conversely, if you're delivering a poor one, you're going to fall behind that market index and your competitors. And I think that ultimately, to me, is the exclamation point on the case for customer experience. And I think it's a real powerful illustration of the ROI.
Yeah, again, I think a really good point. And as you mentioned, customer experience can take some time. I think it is sometimes hard. People want a measurement in this month or this week, but it is something, sometimes word of mouth or how people refer or how people talk about things, that over time can make a difference and make or break. Is there any maybe one tip that you can give people that are saying, okay, I want to improve my customer experience at my large organization, I want to use technology to do it? What is maybe one tip or piece of advice you would give?
Well, for technology in general, and this is coming from somebody who used to actually run a technology organization for a Fortune 100 company. But one thing that I noticed when I was in that role is that people can get drunk on technology very easily. And so you got to make sure that you're not pursuing technology just for technology's sake. And so that's one overarching piece of advice that I would have for your listeners is you always want to start with the customer experience that you're trying to create and the need, whether overt or latent, within your customer that you're trying to satisfy. You want to start with that and then work backwards and then develop the top technology in accordance with that. So that's one thing I would say. But specific to the kind of technology we've been talking about today in terms of text to speech, I think that what organizations should think about is, are there particular situations or customer episodes or even entire customer segments where people need to consume information in order to accomplish some task, but reading is not a viable option? Just given where they happen to be at that moment, what they're doing, maybe some physical limitation that's imposed on them at that particular moment in time. I think that in those situations, the text to voice products is a great example of a solution in those scenarios that can be extremely relevant and appealing to the customer. And it basically removes a boulder for them, which is like, talk about enriching lives. That's what it's about, removing boulders for your customers so that they can reach their potential, they can do what they need to do. And I think that technology has the opportunity to do that in many situations.
I love it. I love your enthusiasm. And again, just how you break stuff down. The book is absolutely wonderful. If people want to get the book, they want to learn more about anything we talked about, where is the best place to do that?
Sure. So you can go to the book's official website, which is impressed2obsessed.com. Now that's impressed, the number two, obsessed.com. And in addition to learning about the book and buying it there, you can also jump off from there to my company's website, Watermark Consulting, as well as my personal website for my keynote speaking services.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, John, for being here and for sharing again and breaking down all the important elements of customer experience. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Carrie. It was great to be here with you.
And for those watching and listening, don't forget to subscribe to our Read Speaker AI YouTube channel, as well as our podcast, Creative in Tech, wherever you listen to podcasts.